A couple of different things come of that. One is that if you miss a session, you can go back and watch them on YouTube. So like if you missed last week, you can go back and take a look. You can also watch from YouTube if you're ever in a place where you can't do Zoom for some reason, or you just don't like Zoom that much. I can't interact with you as much on YouTube. You can leave a comment in the chat, but I won't see it until later on. Don't monitor it during the actual class.
Have you on YouTube since we started?
If you miss a session, you can go back and watch them on YouTube. I missed that, Tucker. I'm sorry.
How long have you been on YouTube?
Oh, last week was the first week that we did that.
Oh, okay. Yep. Not the beginning.
Oh, there was one other thing I was going to mention about YouTube, and I totally forgot what it is now. Oh, well, anyway, here's another thing. And that's that please know that the thing that's going to be sent to YouTube is exactly the screen that I'm looking at. And so like right now, it's all of your different tiles. And from time to time, it'll be one of your tiles if you're the person speaking or something. And maybe it'll be the text when we pull the text up. But just know that you're being broadcast a little bit there. Not to a massive audience or anything, I promise you, but just so you know. A couple other logistical, just pre-work things. One is, I feel kind of crappy, and so I'm probably not going to do a full hour today. And then two is there's this inauguration thing happening today, and so I know probably some of you either listening to that in the background currently, some of the festivities, or eager to move to that. So thanks for being on the Bible study at all, but also I'll keep that in mind as we charge forward. We'll do what we can, and then let you get loose, especially before 11 o'clock.
Hope you feel better.
Thanks, Louise. I appreciate that. We're just going to give it a few more minutes to let folks sign in, and I am also going to go get a computer charger. So give me just 1 moment. Jacqueline and Tadani.
All right, Chuck, thanks very much. Let's bring in
All right, everyone, we're going to get rolling here. I'm going to go ahead and mute all of your microphones. And as always, you can unmute yourself if you would like to. You can also use the electronic version of raising your hand or wave at me if you want to be called on, and I can work with you to try to get your microphone unmuted if you need help. As always, let's start off with a little bit of review. As I mentioned, we don't have to do as much review because if you missed last week's session, you can go back and watch it on YouTube. That said, if you didn't know that until just now, that doesn't help you a whole lot. So it's worth some conversation around what we heard last week, what we remember, what we thought was important enough that everybody else hear it before we jump into the text today. Who wants to tell us what they remember or what they thought was really important?
Where do we start on this going back? We don't start at chapter 1. I mean, we could talk too long about where does this
We would never
off.
do that. Yeah. Yeah, we can really sort of start with the story a little bit, because we spent a lot of time last week reviewing in terms of context, reviewing the David cycle a little bit, and then reviewing the historical context and so on and so forth. So I think if we really just were to say what's happened so far in First Kings from a narrative perspective, to David, to Solomon, and to other characters that have been involved, and catch us up, and then we'll take off from there. Remember, we stopped somewhere around verse 25, I think, of chapter 2. Although I don't have any of my books with me, so shooting from the hip today. I think that's about right, though.
I remember two very central points. One is David is old and failing. Yeah. And point number two is he's nearing death, and yet in this early kingdom, the order of succession has not been spelled out, and this really creates problems.
Good. Yeah. So we have this picture of an older, frailer David, who is, as he often has been, something of a shadow of David at his glory. And one of the telling ways in which the narrative tries to depict that is that he has Abishag, the Shunammite woman, who keeps his bed warm, but they never have sex because he's presumably because he's too old is the way that the text, I think, wants us to read that. So not his virile young self, not the same one who saw Bathsheba bathing on the roof. And then we've got David's not named a successor. Everybody knows that there's going to be something of a power vacuum. He's got sons who can vie for power a little bit, and so one's gonna try to vie for power with something of force. He's gonna get military leaders around him and pull some priests to his side and all that sort of stuff. And the other will have his mom and the prophet work really hard to secure power.
So this point in the story, we kind of meet Adonijah, who is one of David's many sons, and just happens to be the younger brother of Absalom.
Right.
And he shares a lot of Absalom's characteristics, many of them bad. He also happens to be handsome and loves to showboat and is incredibly narcissistic and sees an opportunity. So he arranges a sacrificial feast, and he invites powerful people, right. Sort of saying, if you come to my feast, you kind of know I'm going to be king. And David doesn't know what he's doing. And two very powerful people that are at this feast showing they support him are Nathan, David's commander of the army, and one of his high priests, help me on the pronunciation here, Abiathar. They're at the feast, but also notably is people who are not invited, and this is very important. Solomon's not invited. Zadok, the other high priest, is not invited. Nathan's not invited, and Benaiah, who may or may not inherit the army, is not invited. So there's really a divided camp here. And then the story turns. Bathsheba says, we got to do something. She shows wisdom and goes to David and sort of lies a little bit, saying, you promised Solomon that would be your successor, and look what Adonijah's doing. And David makes his move right away. Solomon's anointed king. End of Adonijah's little revolt. That's the end of that. And at this point, all these people in this little subplot are spared. And then we get on to this point where David's really about to die, and he gives his last will, which we discussed last week, or his last words.
Good. We'll cover that again here in just a minute. I said we'll cover that again here today.
Yeah. It's interesting. His last will, or his final words, opens with sort of a Deuteronomic passage that I'll read out of my Bible. God orders you to obey all his laws and commands as written in the law of Moses. So whenever you go, you may prosper in everything you do. So there's kind of a, you can disagree, but a Deuteronomic opening here.
Yeah, it absolutely should be read that way.
But then small David takes over. Hypocritical David, vindictive David. He's got a list of people that he feels crossed him during his regime. And he, quote, forgave them and promised them that he wouldn't kill them. He's a merciful man. But if you read between the lines here, he's a hypocrite. I was merciful to these people, but Solomon, I want you to kill them.
Right.
So this is small, petty, vindictive David, or you can read it another way if you're kind to him, i.e. The least of two evils, the least amount of blood to be shed. If you kill these people, there won't be a civil war where a lot of people die, if you can look at it from that perspective. At any rate, among the people on his list are, I'm trying to remember.
Oh, it's okay. We'll go back
Abiathar.
and cover it in a second, Hutch.
Yeah.
We'll read back through it in a minute. That's a very thorough review. Thank you. Thank you. Good. Andy, go ahead.
Yeah, it just struck me looking back a little bit here is how just the role of prophets and God through the prophets. We're all such a small part of this huge mosaic, and whatever we do, whether it's right or wrong, somehow God weaves it together. And
Right.
on this day, I mean, it just overwhelms me. There's 330 million people in this country, 8+ billion in the world. If you went and tried to talk to a person, each person, you couldn't get through them all in your lifetime. And it's just amazing how God works in ways we don't fully understand. And I'm just feel so blessed today.
Thanks, Andy. That's a good point. We, last Sunday we read in church the calling story of Samuel again, which we read as a class not too long ago. And if you remember, there's that line where the word of God wasn't common in that time. God didn't speak to everybody all the time, which isn't that different, I think, than it is most of the time. But we really do have this incredible moment where God, who has shown up in the lives of the occasional judge or to Moses or to Joshua or something like that, shows up to Saul and to David and to Solomon and to God's prophets, and that begins to spread and in incredible ways that are named. And then even when it's not named, we have this recognition that God is there. And so as we would recall, going back and looking at the story of Ruth, or the story, even more the story of Esther. In the story of Ruth, God's not a major figure. God is a figure, but not a major figure. It's really the actions of ordinary people who are being guided by God, and that's right. That's depicted as being right in the heart of this type of history that we're reading through. Esther ends up working the same way. God isn't mentioned by name a single time and doesn't say a word in the book of Esther, but we would understand that God is there behind the scenes the whole time. And so we always end up with this tension, right? From time to time, people hear this very personal calling, and more often than not, people don't. But God is there, being faithful, and in the absence of our faithfulness, nonetheless. Really good point. Okay, last words for review before turning back to the text. Okay. There is a lot to uncover in those first couple of chapters. So again, I'll invite you to go back and take a look sometime if you would like to, or listen. or both, to what we covered last week or the week before. No, just last week. Sorry. We'll pull our text back up. Where are we? This is chapter 1. I'm going to get us over to chapter 2. All right, so as Hutch mentioned, David's about to die, turns to Solomon and gives Solomon his hit list. And we can see that as being petty, vindictive, small, David, as Hutch mentioned, or we could see that as being shrewd political leader. That would not be the first time that David said, these are the people who must be assassinated in order to secure power. But it is somewhat in contrast, I think it's fair to say it's in contrast to this bizarre sort of insertion of the Deuteronomistic editor's language. And so I do take a notice of that there at the beginning. Keep all the statutes, commandments, ordinances, testimonies, etc., laws of God. It's very much the Deuteronomistic editor. Okay. We talked a little bit as we were reading through this about, sorry, I keep flipping my screen around, about the way in which he talks about Joab, but we didn't really pay too much attention to how in the list of bad deeds of Joab, he doesn't go in a great detail, or really we could say at all, how Joab was responsible for the death of Absalom. And now something worth paying attention to. What's David at there? Is this more evident? It's just not what he wants to bring up with Solomon, or is that part of what he means when he says, you know what Joab, son of Zeruiah, did to me? And he doesn't even have to name. All right, David dies. We covered that. And Adonijah comes to Bathsheba. And this was really, I think, an interesting point of reflection for us last week. Comes to Bathsheba, request the Shunammite woman, and it says it's a small little favor. And Bathsheba plays along and says, oh yeah, of course, I'll be happy to bring that up with Solomon. No big deal. Solomon, of course, immediately recognizes that's the power play. Bathsheba knew that Solomon would recognize it as a power play, and so Solomon will seek Adonijah's life and the potential for mercy, as it was found when the Civil War was kind of brewing there for a little bit, is eliminated, and Solomon will have Adonijah immediately, but not just him. So I think we stopped here. King Solomon sent Benaiah, son of Jehoiada. He struck him down and he died. But it continues. Verse 26, the king said to the priest Abiathar, go to Anathoth, to your estate, for you deserve death. But I will not at this time put you to death, because you carried the ark of the Lord before, the Lord God, I should say, before my father David, because you shared in all the hardships that my father endured. So Solomon banished Abiathar from being priest to the Lord, thus fulfilling the word of the Lord that he had spoken concerning the house of Eli in Shiloh. I can take a look at that sometime if you would like to. That's very much a part of God's promise to Eli. Verse 28, when the news came to Joab, for Joab had supported Adonijah, though he had not supported Absalom, Joab fled to the tent of the Lord and grasped the horns of the altar. And here again is that maybe the request for sanctuary, something like that. When it was told King Solomon, Joab has fled to the tent of the Lord and is now beside the altar, Solomon sent Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, saying, go strike him down. So Benaiah came to the tent of the Lord and said to him, the king commands, come out. But he said, no, I will die here. Then Benaiah brought the king word again, saying, thus said Joab, and thus he answered me. The king replied to him, do as he has said, strike him down and bury him, and thus take away from me and from my father's house the guilt for the blood that Joab shed without cause. The Lord will bring back his bloody deeds on his own head, because without the knowledge of my father David, he attacked and killed with the sword 2 men more righteous and better than himself, Abner, son of Ner, commander of the army of Israel, and Amasa, son of Jether, commander of the army of Judah. so shall their blood come back on the head of Joab and on the head of his descendants forever. But to David and to his descendants and to his house and to his throne there shall be peace from the Lord forevermore. Then Benaiah son of Jehoiada went up and struck him down and killed him, and he was buried at his own house near the wilderness. The king put Benaiah son of Jehoiada over the army in his place, and the king put the priest Zadok in place of Abiathar. Then the king sent and summoned Shimei and said to him, build yourself a house in Jerusalem and live there, and do not go out from there to any place whatever. For on the day you go out and cross the Wadi Kidron, know that for certain you shall die. Your blood shall be on your own head. And Shimei said to the king, the sentence is fair. As my lord the king has said, so will your servant do. So Shimei lived in Jerusalem many days. But it happened at the end of 3 years that 2 of Shimei's slaves ran away to King Achish, son of Maacah, in Gath. When it was told, Shimei, your slaves are in Gath, Shimei arose and saddled a donkey and went to Achish in Gath to search for his slaves. Shimei went and brought his slaves from Gath. When Solomon was told that Shimei had gone from Jerusalem to Gath and returned, the king sent and summoned Shimei and said to him, did I not make you swear by the Lord and solemnly adjure you, saying, know for certain that on the day you go out and go to any place whatever, you shall die. And you said to me, the sentence is fair, I accept. Why then have you not kept your oath to the Lord and the commandment with which I charged you? The king also said to Shimei, you know in your own heart all the evil that you did to my father David. So the Lord will bring back your evil on your own head. But King Solomon shall be blessed, and the throne of David shall be established before the Lord forever. Then the king commanded Benaiah son of Jehoiada, and he went out and struck him down, and he died. So the kingdom was established in the hand of Solomon. We will stop there for a minute and see what you noticed. Yeah, Louise.
Just a short comment, but it doesn't seem like through all of these, you did this and you did that and you disobeyed my law, that actually David's final wishes for all his enemies to be done away with kind of comes to pass anyway.
Yeah, so David's hit list is definitely going to end up playing out in the way that David wanted, and I think what we have to wonder about is when Solomon shows Shimei, for instance, does he have the sense that he's violating David's final wishes? Is that the pursuit of wisdom? What is Solomon doing to say build a house in Jerusalem and just never, you're in house arrest basically, or you are not to leave Jerusalem. The Wadi Kidron, remember, is the river that, or the creek that runs right alongside the valley next to Jerusalem. So just don't leave Jerusalem.
Isn't that just kind of let's give him another chance and let fate decide so I don't have to do it directly?
Yeah, it's something like that. I mean, I really think that that Solomon probably understands David's vengeance to be not necessary for him to carry out, and the political shrewdness that we named earlier, where David says you got to consolidate power. He probably thinks that he's done that, and so yeah, probably thinks that he doesn't have to do much more, but doesn't hesitate for a moment when it's time to act. And that I think we'll see in Solomon from time to time. I think Solomon, like David, and certainly even more so like Saul, will have these moments where we have to say, oh gosh, he's wise and he's strong and he's great and he's all this sort of stuff. And then we'll have these other moments where we say, from time to time, he is decisive in a way that seems politically shrewd, but maybe is not actually in the best interest of his household or of the people or whatever. So it's good to keep an eye on. Okay, Scott Simcoe.
I would say two things. One is people always act in their own best self-interest.
Yeah.
And two, things really haven't changed in 2,500 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
When somebody new comes into power, they may not necessarily kill them, but they're certainly politically and or professionally banished.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a rare occasion where that's not true for sure. And certainly in this period of time, even more rare. I mean, generally speaking, it's just kill. And that's understood to be some kind of almost divine right. Just shore up all the loose ends, take care of everybody. And David did that a little bit, but David also, if you recall, in some cases doesn't do that. And when I think we were to understand some of that as David somehow being wise, and certainly with Solomon, I think that's the case. But yeah, I think as we turn the page over to chapter 3, we'll see even more this notion of Solomon acting in his own interest, and he'll move back and forth. I mean, at the same time, people have the capacity to not do that, but pretty quickly we see that he's got significant self-interest and will act on it from time to time. Okay, Hutch. And then Andy.
It became as reading this a little bit fascinated by Adonijah's character, and this going to Bathsheba with this request is almost a suicidal move. I mean, you'd have to be an idiot to do this. Yeah. The only thing I can figure out is in reading the opening lines of chapter 2, this guy must have been such a hopeless narcissist that he can't see beyond the end of his nose. Yeah, that's right. He's Bathsheba's playing chess and he's playing checkers, and he really thinks that he only needs to do this one move and that she's going to be easily manipulated, and that Solomon's probably going to be easily manipulated by his mother, and no big deal. I'll just advance my checkers pieces down the board and Bathsheba plays him for a fool for sure. It cost him his life. Can't see past the end of his nose. I like that. Not the brightest character, and it's at the same time, it's left somewhat ambiguous. Does he actually think that what's going to end up happening is that he gets David's bedmate, and then he goes back off into the wilderness somewhere, and he calls the people to his side, and everybody rallies and says, "Oh, look, David's Shunammite woman is now with Adonijah, and he is the oldest son, and let's go to war." Does he think that's going to happen? I don't know. It's there for us to ponder, and especially ponder because it doesn't come anywhere close to that actually taking place. Okay, Andy.
Yeah, just quickly, I thought it was interesting that King Solomon sacked the priest Abiathar. I'm thinking like state government over spiritual, but then I remember Solomon was divinely appointed king, yeah. So he was in fact the monarchy or the god.
That's right. This is functionally a theocracy, and so as we've had it with David before him, and to some extent with Saul, we get these blurring of the lines. Like there is some bureaucracy being built around the government, so to speak, and we have an official role for a prophet or multiple prophets, and we have an official role for a priest, but the king from time to time will overlap with some of those other roles, and will understand himself or be understood to be a prophet, or understand himself or be understood to be a priest. And again, I think to get us back to the text here in a second, I'm pretty sure that almost immediately in chapter 3, we see a little bit more of that. I think Solomon goes off and starts sacrificing in chapter 3 as a priest. He is, central. He has all the authority. All right, let's pull the text back up. And we'll flip over to chapter 3. We get some familiar material, I think, in here. All right, chapter 3, verse 1. Solomon made a marriage alliance with Pharaoh, king of Egypt. And just note there that it's not like it was in the book of Exodus. It's not a specific Pharaoh. It is the office of Pharaoh. And we need to take note of that. We'll talk about it in a little bit if you'd like to. Made a marriage alliance with Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and he took Pharaoh's daughter and brought her into the city of David until he had finished building his own house and the house of Yahweh and the wall around Jerusalem. People were sacrificing at the high places, however, because no house had yet been built for the name of the Lord. Solomon loved the Lord, walking in the statutes of his father David. Only he sacrificed and offered incense at the high places. The king went to Gibeon to sacrifice there, for that was the principal high place. Solomon used to offer 1,000 burnt offerings on that altar. At Gibeon, the Lord appeared to Solomon in a dream by night, and God said, "Ask what I should give you." And Solomon said, "You have shown great and steadfast love to your servant, my father David, because he walked before you in faithfulness and in righteousness, and in uprightness of heart toward you. And you have kept for him this great and steadfast love, and have given him a son to sit on his throne today. And now, O Lord my God, you have made your servant king in place of my father David, although I am only a little child. I do not know how to go out or to come in. And your servant is in the midst of the people whom you have chosen, a great people, so numerous they cannot be numbered or counted. Give your servant, therefore, an understanding mind to govern your people, able to discern between good and evil. For who can govern this, your great people?" It pleased the Lord that Solomon had asked this. God said to him, "Because you have asked this, you have not and have not asked for yourself long life or riches, or for the life of your enemies, but have asked for yourself understanding to discern what is right. And now do according to your word. Indeed, I give you a wise and discerning mind. No one like you has been before you, and no one like you shall arise after you. I give you also what you have not asked, both riches and honor all your life. No other king shall compare with you. If you will walk in my ways, keeping my statutes and my commandments as your father David walked, then I will lengthen your life." Then Solomon awoke. It had been a dream. He came to Jerusalem, where he stood before the ark of the covenant of the Lord. He offered up burnt offerings and offerings of well-being, and provided a feast for all his servants. We'll stop there for a minute. Check in with you. What do you think?
It shows one of the many ways that God closely communicates with us. In this case, it's a dream. Jacob had dreams. Joseph had dreams and fled to Egypt, that sort of thing. So God does come to you through dreams, and in many other ways.
Yep, that's very good.
And I think that maybe this is where we begin to get the idea of Solomon as the seat of wisdom, because here is where he's asking for God's wisdom to lead the people instead of something for himself.
Right. So yeah, we've seen him be decisive, to sit as a sort of wise judge already. He's been referred to as being wise, but this is new. This is
You're freezing up.
we're supposed to. This is, it's like I froze. Yep. I'm gonna turn off my video feed and see if that helps a little bit. I have a feeling that my quarantine kids who are on their own classes right now are probably eating up the bandwidth. All right, let's see, Hutch.
You're, I'm sure, leading up to the discussion. So right away, it would seem from God's reply to Solomon that wisdom is transcendent. There are other possibilities out there, such as a long life, riches, death to your enemies, and that Solomon didn't ask for, but those possibilities are out there. But the outcome of this is that wisdom transcends all of this. And the second thing then is, what is wisdom? And I was trying to look here, and it looks like three words come into play here. Justice is part of wisdom, and knowing the difference between good and evil. The discussion of wisdom, I'm sure, goes much, much deeper than that, but I'm just opening a door.
Yeah, great, thank you. And it's a really important door. We'll see it on display a number of different times and ways. I can get my video to come back on to work for me. No, oh my gosh, I'm losing y'all again.
Uh-oh. Is he gone? Oh, no.
All right.
Are we alone in the classroom?
I may be coming back.
Yay, yay.
All right. So I'm not entirely sure you can hear me.
Yes,
Yes,
But I'm going to say a couple of things. One is if my internet connection drops again, I will bid you all adieu for the day because it probably isn't going to come back, and we'll regather here in the middle of chapter 3 next week. Wisdom, I want us to talk about that really quickly, assuming that may be the last topic that we get out. Hutch, what I heard of your comments were really poignant. So wisdom, there is a difference between what we might call divine wisdom and the wisdom of this world, which I usually try to use the word shrewd when I talk about the wisdom of this world. That's often the word used to describe the serpent and the children of this age. Jesus uses that word to describe the wisdom of the children of this age in the Gospels. But wisdom, as it's understood in the wisdom literature of the Bible, Sophia, this divine, sometimes feminine embodied wisdom, is understanding the created pattern of the universe as God intended it and acting in accordance with that created pattern. And so, to use the word justice, justice is absolutely a component of that God intended for the world to be a certain way, and everything, something being just means it's in alignment with the way God intended it. Something being unjust means it is out of alignment. Same with right or righteous. If you think about things being just aligned, and famously there's that depiction of the plumb line being used to determine whether or not the wall is straight or crooked, right? Those who are wise act with justice because they understand the way that God intended for the universe to work, and they act in accordance with it. Those who are shrewd do not necessarily do that. Right? So really good to determine that. And then the last thing I'll say is that knowing good and evil thing, there's a lot that we can unpack there. One is about our presumptions about Solomon's age and what he might mean by that. But I think we've got to go back and look at the garden a little bit here. That Solomon wants what Adam and Eve were trying to get through the eating of that fruit, to have wisdom like God has, I think, to be like God's. And it seems that that's what God has on tap for him is some kind of dose of that wisdom. Maybe not the fullness of it, but some dose of it anyway. What do you think? Not sure if that's silence because my question didn't come through, or my comments didn't come through, or silence because you're all just wondering and pondering. Andy, I see your hand.
you're getting deep. Rephrase the question.
I think that's amazing. It's interesting to me that it's called out that Solomon, God says, Solomon, no one like thee before thee, nor shall arise after thee. Are there other places in the Bible where God calls out the uniqueness of somebody?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I mean, yes is my gut answer. And I think of uniqueness in value neutral terms, but my COVID brain is not going to let me quickly go to like 3 different examples. I'm pretty sure. Does anybody else have an example that you want to toss out?
I just, the other follow-up thing is that, Solomon is unique because he asked God for an understanding heart, and
yeah,
maybe that's the way it surely is the way for me to grow into wisdom and, you know, a meaningful life and things like that.
Yeah.
Amen.
One of the
That's-
things that I believe to be true. Go ahead, Louise.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say that one of the things I believe to be true in our spiritual lives is that we should request the graces that we want, and that Jesus tells us to do that. I think Solomon's a good example of it. For all the other mess that may be in his story, I think he's requesting something that's in accordance with God's will, and I think he's praying a really honest prayer for the grace of wisdom, and I think we could learn something from that. All right, Louise, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I think my initial silence when you asked was trying to connect what I was thinking I got out of that with the whole idea of wisdom, and that was taking me a bit of time. But from the beginning, something jumped out at me here about the wisdom of knowing that we aren't the only concern of ourselves. You know what I mean? There's a whole world out there. And so and it also echoes, I think, what Solomon was asking for, and what, of course, the editor wants us to understand, that it echoes the beginning of the Great Commandment, actually the second part of the Great Commandment, to love others as much as we love ourselves. So he's demonstrating this by saying, yeah, you could have asked for riches and a long life and property and all those other things, but there's a lot more to life. And that's what Andy was saying, that the wisdom that we seek along that faith journey is often about freeing ourselves from just thinking about ourselves.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Really, really, really salient point. Richard Rohr, I think, would talk a lot about that the natural, not necessarily the end, but maybe the telos of our journey so frequently is removing ourselves from the center of our story.
Mm.
Very good. Okay, Catherine.
Yeah, along those same lines, I was just going to say the humility is what strikes me in his request about how he's only a little child and who can do this, you know. Yeah. Especially someone who would go on to build the temple, you know. The humility is what really strikes me as being the hallmark of wisdom in this case.
That's great. Yeah. And and the way I read it, I don't think that he actually is a child. It's possible to read that he's very young, but it just doesn't fit with me into the timeline of David very well. And so, again, it's possible. I don't want to say that it's not possible, but I read it as him kind of being old enough to rule, but referring to himself as a child as a sign of humility. I really like that reading.
Yeah, almost the way Jesus refers to the little children, right? I mean, as learners and disciples, not necessarily as young ones.
Yeah, good. Very good. Okay, anything else on this topic? Otherwise, I'm going to jump in and tarnish his record really quickly. Okay, I don't mean to tarnish it in all seriousness, but I do want to just go back and draw one point, and that is that at the beginning of that, the entering into a marriage alliance with Pharaoh, king of Egypt, you may just ponder that a little bit and what it means for Solomon to make that marriage alliance. Like David made marriage alliances with Gentiles. It's not like that is the end of the world, though we should probably read that as not necessarily always being something that the people loved, but there's something special about the office of Pharaoh and the place of Egypt. And so gives that some thought. We can come back and talk about that next week too. Sorry for the internet connection issues, y'all. So it looks like I've lost basic control of things in Zoom. Like I can't turn off the YouTube stream anymore and all that good stuff. So I'm gonna assume that you can hear me well enough for me to say a prayer and get y'all out of here. And we'll catch up next week. The Lord be with you.
Also with you.
Let us pray. God, we give you thanks for this day.